A 2,000-year-old stone bridge still supports modern traffic today. That enduring strength comes from a hidden geometric code, a set of ancient rules of shape and proportion that we have largely forgotten. By the end of this journey, you will understand the unbreakable principles that allowed these structures to defy time itself. We will uncover why the curve of an arch is so powerful and how master builders used mathematics as their secret weapon. How did they create designs so perfect that they have outlasted entire empires? What does their timeless resilience say about our own modern constructions? Look at the curve of a stone bridge arch. It is a shape written into the world itself, from the domed ceiling of a seashell to the vault of a canyon carved by a river. Ancient builders did not invent this form, they recognized it. They saw in nature a perfect solution to a monumental problem: how to span a great distance with stone, a material that crumbles under tension. The arch became the very soul of their bridges, a geometric answer to the relentless pull of gravity. Its curved profile is deceptively simple. When weight presses down from above, the arch does not simply resist, it transforms that force. The load travels along the curve, pushing each stone against its neighbor, channeling the energy downward and outward onto the solid ground at its sides, the abutments. This is the principle of compression, where every element is squeezed together, and stone is fantastically strong when squeezed. The Roman architect Vitruvius championed the semicircular arch as the ideal for public works, a form where every part of the curve shares the burden equally. At the very top of this perfect form sits the keystone, the final wedge-shaped piece that is driven into place. This single stone is the lock that completes the circuit of force. It presses against the stones on either side, which press against their neighbors, creating a stable, self-supporting system where every block holds every other block up. It is a chain of stone that cannot be broken from the top. How did these engineers grasp such sophisticated physics centuries before the laws of statics were formally written down? Their genius was in observing the world and translating its principles into built form. This profound understanding of shape, however, would have been useless without an equally profound understanding of the very stones they used. That profound understanding of shape would have been useless without an equally profound material to build it with. On the docks of ancient Roman ports, workers mixed a revolutionary substance, a concrete that could set and harden even when completely submerged in seawater. This was not the concrete we know today. Its secret recipe, a blend of lime and a specific type of volcanic ash from the region of Pozzuoli, created a chemical reaction that modern scientists are only now beginning to fully decipher. When analyzed, ancient samples reveal the growth of rare, interlocking crystals that actually fill in microscopic cracks over time, meaning this 2,000-year-old material can grow stronger with age, a property our own modern concrete utterly lacks. This was the perfect partner to the arch. Builders would construct sturdy wooden frames in the exact shape of an arch or a vault. They would then pour this phenomenal concrete into the mold, where it would set not as a simple filler, but as a single, monolithic piece of artificial stone. It became an integral part of the structural system, chemically bonding with the stone blocks and creating a unified whole that distributed weight with incredible efficiency. The geometry of the arch directed the forces, and this supernatural concrete withstood them, a perfect marriage of form and material. What could our modern construction industry, which builds for decades, learn from an ancient recipe that has proven its resilience for centuries? Yet, even the most brilliant design and the strongest material are vulnerable to a single, critical point of failure: The ultimate test of any bridge lies not in its center, but at its edges where all that gathered force finally meets the earth. The ultimate test of any bridge lies at its edges where all that gathered force finally meets the earth. But before that force could be channeled, it had to be contained within a structure of almost impossible exactness. Deep within an ancient quarry, the air thick with dust and the rhythmic tap of iron on stone, masons worked with a quiet devotion. Their task was to transform raw, irregular rock into geometric perfection. With nothing more than chisels, wooden squares, and weighted plumb lines, they dressed each stone block, carefully shaping every face to be perfectly flat and every angle true. The goal was a fit so precise that when the blocks were assembled, the joints between them would be nearly invisible, eliminating the need for weak mortar. This is the same principle seen in the breathtaking walls of Inca masonry, where gigantic, uniquely shaped stones interlock so tightly that you cannot slip a razor blade between them. That level of craftsmanship was not just for show, it was a fundamental structural requirement. For a bridge arch, every stone, especially the wedge-shaped voussoirs, had to be cut to exact dimensions. A single block, even slightly misshapen, would disrupt the perfect transfer of force along the arch's curve, creating a point of weakness that could lead to collapse. How did these artisans achieve such millimeter precision with what we would consider primitive tools? The answer lies in a lifetime of accumulated skill, a keen eye for geometry, and an unwavering commitment to getting it right. They understood that the strength of the entire arch depended on the perfection of each individual part. This devotion to a perfect fit created a monolithic structure where loads were distributed uniformly across the entire surface, allowing the geometry to perform its magic without interruption. And this meticulous work on individual stones was all in service of a larger master plan, a hidden geometric blueprint that dictated the placement of every single block. For those ancient architects, the compass and straightedge were far more than simple tools. They were instruments for channeling the fundamental order of the cosmos. This was the world of sacred geometry, a philosophy where mathematical ratios and perfect shapes were seen as the very language of creation, the blueprint used by the gods to build the universe. The Greek philosopher Plato himself wrote that geometry draws the soul toward truth, a pursuit of the eternal forms that underlie our shifting reality. For a bridge builder, this was not abstract theory, it was practical engineering infused with spiritual purpose. They sought to embed their structures with the same harmony found in a nautilus shell or the orbits of the planets, believing that a design aligned with cosmic law would inherently possess greater stability and endure longer in the physical world. This philosophical pursuit translated into very specific, rigid design rules. The most revered proportion was the golden ratio, a relationship where the whole is to the larger part as the larger part is to the smaller, a balance that appears repeatedly in nature. When applied to a bridge, this and other sacred ratios dictated the precise relationship between the arch's span, its height, and the thickness of its supporting piers. A bridge designed by these principles was not a random collection of stones. It was a single, integrated system where every dimension was in perfect conversation with every other. This optimized the structure, using the minimum amount of material to achieve the maximum possible strength, creating a perfect equilibrium between weight, thrust, and support. The geometric constructions also generated repetitive patterns of angles and curves that, entirely by design, happened to distribute structural stress with incredible efficiency. The recurring triangles within an arch's profile, or the specific curvature derived from a compass sweep, created natural pathways for forces to travel along, preventing stress from concentrating at any single weak point. This was physics emerging from philosophy, a happy marriage where the pursuit of divine harmony yielded supremely resilient structures. There is also a powerful human element to consider. Working on a project believed to be a reflection of divine order would have inspired a different level of care and reverence in the masons and engineers. The drive for precision was not merely technical, it was a form of devotion. Did this shared belief in a sacred blueprint enforce a rigor and a standard of craftsmanship that simply would not have existed otherwise? The longevity of these ancient bridges may very well stem from this powerful fusion, where unshakable faith in an ideal provided the discipline necessary to execute a nearly perfect physical form. This philosophical foundation gave them the confidence to build not for their own time, but for eternity, setting the stage for the final, and perhaps most crucial, element in their success, the deep understanding of the land itself. An ancient engineer standing at a riverbank did not need a complex formula to design a lasting bridge, only a set of simple, powerful ratios. They worked with rules of thumb, practical knowledge passed down through generations that encoded profound structural truths. One such rule dictated that the thickness of a stone arch should be proportional to its radius, a straightforward calculation that guaranteed the arch would be neither too slender to buckle nor too bulky to be efficient. This was not guesswork, it was applied geometry refined over centuries. Renaissance architects, looking back at the ruins of Rome with awe, meticulously documented these very systems. They recognized that the ancients had perfected a language of proportion where every part of a structure spoke to every other part. The thickness of a pier was not an arbitrary choice, it was a direct mathematical consequence of the arch's span above it. The spandrels, the walls that filled the space between the arch and the deck, and the decking itself all followed this coherent system, creating a unified whole that managed and distributed loads in a perfectly predictable way. To design an arch, a builder might begin by drawing a circle with a compass, its radius defining the arch's curvature. Within this circle, they could inscribe a polygon, perhaps a hexagon or an octagon. Each side of this polygon would then determine the precise size and angle of the individual stone blocks, the voussoirs. This simple geometric construction solved the entire puzzle of how many stones were needed and exactly how to cut them. Consider the magnificent Alcantara Bridge in Spain, a Roman masterpiece that has stood for nearly 2,000 years. Its grand central arch, spanning over 90 feet, was not a product of chance. The relationship between its soaring height, the robust thickness of its stonework, and the sturdy width of its supporting piers all align with these ancient proportional systems. The entire structure is a symphony of interlocking ratios, each dimension calculated to work in harmony with the others, ensuring that the immense weight of the bridge and any load upon it is channeled smoothly downward. How could such rule-of-thumb calculations produce structures that have endured for millennia? The answer lies in the fact that these rules were not arbitrary. They were the distilled essence of observed physical law, a geometry that inherently directs force along the strongest possible path. This mathematical foresight was always complemented by a deep, intuitive understanding of the environment, a final layer of ancient wisdom. A master bridge builder's first tool was not a chisel or a compass, but a practiced eye for the land itself. Before a single stone was cut, the engineer would walk the riverbank, studying the flow of the water and the character of the soil. They were searching for the one spot where the earth refused to yield, a solid platform of bedrock or densely compacted gravel that could serve as an unshakable anchor for the bridge's abutments. Modern geologists have surveyed the locations of ancient Roman and medieval bridges and often find them perched on surprisingly stable ground, natural formations that have resisted erosion and settling for millennia. This was no accident. The builders understood that the entire geometric system of the arch, that perfect chain of compression, would fail if its endpoints could shift even slightly. They also read the river's personality, avoiding bends where the current undercuts the banks or floodplains where seasonal surges could pound against the piers with destructive force. Their goal was to find a place where the water flowed calmly and the ground beneath was a willing partner to their ambition. But what happened when the perfect geometric design met an imperfect, marshy site? Their ingenuity truly shone then. They would drive long wooden piles, essentially giant tree trunks, deep into the soft riverbed until they hit a resistant layer far below, creating a stable artificial forest upon which to build their stone platforms. The piers of many medieval bridges are not simply sitting on the river bottom, they are anchored into it, a testament to a profound understanding of subsurface conditions we now call soil mechanics. How did they know to do this without modern drilling equipment or soil samples? Their knowledge was born of observation, of seeing which riverbanks stood firm during floods and which collapsed. They learned to read the landscape like a book, interpreting the types of plants that grew and the way the water carved the shore. This deep, intuitive grasp of geology and hydrology was the silent, invisible foundation upon which everything else was built. A flawless arch on a shifting foundation is a tragedy waiting to happen, but a well-built arch on an unyielding base becomes a permanent part of the world. A single arch is a powerful statement, but a series of them is a conversation. This is the art of the vault, where the principle of the arch is extended into space, creating a three-dimensional tunnel of stone. A multi-span bridge is a masterpiece of this concept, a chain of interdependent arches where each one supports its neighbors. The outward thrust generated by one arch is met and neutralized by the counter thrust of the arch beside it. This creates a stable, continuous system that is far stronger than the sum of its individual parts, a perfect geometric alliance stretching across a river. This evolution allowed builders to tackle wider, more challenging rivers, transforming a single elegant solution into an unstoppable repetition. The next great leap was the ribbed vault, a signature of Gothic bridge design. Here, the solid stone ceiling of a simple barrel vault was replaced by a skeletal framework of stone ribs. Think of it as the difference between a solid wall and a steel girder frame. These ribs acted as a predefined pathway, channeling the immense weight of the bridge deck and any load upon it downward along specific, slender lines to the supporting piers. This ingenious system meant the spaces between the ribs could be filled with lighter material, allowing for structures that were both taller and more open, achieving a breathtaking balance of strength and grace. The geometric complexity deepened with intersections. Where two barrel vaults crossed, they formed a groin vault, creating four distinct curved surfaces. The line where these surfaces met, the groin, became a natural channel for concentrating and directing force downward. For the masons, calculating the precise angles of these intersecting stone ribs was a high-stakes puzzle. A single miscalculation would misdirect the load, creating a fatal weakness. Their success lay in ensuring that every intersecting line, every carved surface, kept the pathways of compression clear and direct, turning geometric complexity into structural simplicity. These vaulted spaces beneath bridges were far from dark, forgotten cavities. They became vital public squares, housing bustling shops and offering shelter from the rain, adding immense utility and societal value to the bridges themselves. How did mastering the vault change the landscape of cities? It enabled builders to create not just crossings but destinations, multi-level structures that were feats of engineering and hubs of daily life. This mastery over stone and force represents the peak of ancient and medieval engineering, yet it raises a profound question about our own time. We have materials they could never have dreamed of, concrete that sets in hours and steel of immense strength. So why do our modern bridges often require constant repair while their stone ancestors simply stand? The answer may lie not in the substance, but in the philosophy of the design itself. A stone arch is a powerful geometric lock, but that lock is under constant pressure to spring open. All the force channeled downward by the curve also generates a powerful sideways push, an outward thrust that constantly tries to push the supporting walls apart. This is the hidden tension at the heart of every great arch and vault, a secret struggle that ancient engineers had to solve. Their brilliant answer was the buttress, a sturdy, projecting support that seems humble but is absolutely vital. Medieval master builders wrote explicitly about the need for these staying walls, knowing that their lofty designs would collapse without a way to counteract this lateral force. The buttress does not fight the arch, it completes its work. By leaning against the wall at a calculated angle, it absorbs that outward thrust and redirects it safely down into the earth. The design of a buttress was a precise geometric calculation. Its mass and its angle were not arbitrary. A thicker, more massive buttress was needed for a wider arch with greater thrust, and its angle was set to create the most direct path for that force to travel into the foundation. You can see this principle in its most primal form on ancient Roman aqueducts, where massive, sloping buttresses anchor the entire structure directly into a hillside, using the solid rock of the landscape itself as the ultimate counterweight. This was an early, brilliant understanding of counter-thrust in action. Then came a breathtaking evolution, the flying buttress. This was a leap of both engineering and artistry. Instead of a solid wall of stone, builders created a graceful, arched arm of masonry that reached out from a distant, heavy pier to press against the critical point of a high vault. This allowed them to apply immense support exactly where it was needed without adding crushing weight to the bridge deck itself. It was a way to borrow strength from a distance, turning a potential weakness into the very source of the structure's soaring strength and enduring resilience. The buttress in all its forms stands as a final testament to a holistic wisdom. It proves that the ancients did not just see a bridge as a beautiful arch, but as a complete system of forces where every element, from the keystone to the outermost support, worked in geometric harmony to achieve a single goal: permanence. The true adversary of any stone bridge was never gravity alone, but the patient, relentless power of flowing water. Ancient engineers understood that to build for eternity, they had to design not just to cross the river, but to become a part of its flow. They shaped their structures in harmony with the current, using geometry as a shield against erosion. The most critical point of contact was the pier, the vertical support standing directly in the water's path. A blunt, flat-faced pier would act like a dam, forcing the water to slam against it with violent force, churning and digging at the riverbed in a process called scour. This would eventually undermine the foundation and cause catastrophic failure. Their brilliant solution was the cutwater. On a Roman bridge, you will see that the piers are not rectangular blocks. They are extended upstream into a sharp, angled or rounded nose like the prow of a ship. This elegant geometric form does not fight the current, it cleaves it. The water is smoothly parted and guided around the sides of the pier, its energy dissipated rather than concentrated. Downstream, the pier often featured a similar, though usually less pronounced, tapered form, allowing the turbulent wakes to merge cleanly without creating destructive vortices that would further eat away at the riverbed. This was an intuitive mastery of fluid dynamics, a way of persuading the water to do less harm. The shape of the arches themselves was a key part of this hydraulic strategy. A semicircular or gently curved segmental arch offered the least possible obstruction to high water and flood debris. During a spring melt or a heavy storm, the rising water could pass freely through these large, open portals instead of being blocked by the bridge deck and building up against it like a battering ram. This simple geometric choice prevented the bridge from acting as a dam, which would have led to upstream flooding and immense pressure on the entire structure. Some bridges took this even further, incorporating dedicated spillways, which were low, secondary arches or openings designed specifically to allow floodwaters to escape. These features ensured that the water always had a clear path, protecting the geometric integrity of the arches and piers from forces they were not designed to withstand. Modern hydraulic engineers who study these ancient crossings express a deep admiration for their optimized forms. The streamlined piers, the wide arch openings, the careful alignment with the river's natural flow, all of it speaks to a profound observational wisdom. These builders may not have had the equations for fluid mechanics, but they had spent a lifetime watching rivers. They knew how water behaved, how it carved and shifted, and sought the path of least resistance. They designed their bridges to offer that very path, inviting the river to flow through rather than smash against. How many modern concrete culverts, clogged with debris after a single heavy rain, could learn from this ancient, graceful collaboration between stone and stream? This holistic approach to the environment ensured that the perfect geometry of the arch could perform its duty for centuries, unmolested by the very element it spanned. The semicircular arch was a masterpiece of balance, but its perfect half-circle shape also imposed a strict limit. To cross a wider river, you needed either a much taller arch, which was difficult to build, or many more piers in the water, which disrupted the flow. Roman engineers, always pushing boundaries, found an elegant solution by bending the rules of geometry itself. They developed the segmental arch, a curve that is less than a full semicircle. This flatter, wider arc was a radical departure. It created a bridge that sat lower over the water, with a profile that felt both more graceful and more modern. The secret to its strength lay in a different distribution of force. While a semicircular arch sends a significant amount of its load outward, creating powerful horizontal thrust, the segmental arch's flatter curve pushes more of that force directly downward. This crucial difference meant the massive, fortress-like abutments needed to resist thrust could be lighter and less bulky. It was a more efficient system, using geometry to do more with less stone. The legendary engineer Apollodorus of Damascus harnessed this principle for one of the ancient world's most ambitious projects, Trajan's bridge across the mighty Danube. His temporary but colossal wooden structure, built to support a military campaign, is believed to have featured segmented arches, allowing for an incredible series of wide spans that had never been seen before. Designing such an arch required even greater geometric precision. The key relationship was between the arch's span, the distance it crossed, and its rise, the height of the curve at its center. In a segmental arch, the rise is a much smaller fraction of the span. This gentle curve meant that the wedge-shaped stones, the voussoirs, had to be cut with extremely subtle, shallow angles. The Keystone, in particular, was no longer a steep wedge but a long, low block that acted as the final, critical lock for this extended geometric form. A single miscalculation in the cutting of these stones would prevent the arch from closing properly, leaving a fatal flaw in the entire structure. This form was perfectly suited for bridging wide, shallow rivers. A series of low, segmental arches could stride across the waterway without the need for towering, expensive piers. The open, unobstructed profile also allowed boats with tall masts to pass more easily, making these bridges vital links for both trade and travel. Beyond pure function, the segmental arch held a distinct aesthetic appeal. Its horizontal emphasis and sleek lines gave it a surprisingly contemporary look, a testament to an engineering sensibility that valued elegance as much as endurance. How did this simple variation on a timeless theme expand the possibilities of design? It proved that the principles of arch construction were not rigid dogma, but a flexible language. Ancient builders were not just copying a shape, they were actively innovating within its geometric rules, discovering new forms that could meet new challenges. This spirit of innovation, however, would face its greatest test not in the calm rivers of the empire, but in the stormy, unpredictable waters of the future. A perfect arch is a universal idea, but its form is shaped by the flow of people and knowledge across borders. Along the Silk Road, more than just silk and spices traveled the dusty trade routes. The very geometry of bridge building was a commodity exchanged between cultures. A Persian engineer's innovation could, over centuries, find its way into the heart of a European cathedral bridge. This cross-pollination of ideas created hybrid structures of remarkable strength and beauty, proving that architectural evolution thrived on connection. One of the most profound examples is the pointed arch, a form that would come to define the soaring Gothic style. While the Romans perfected the semicircular arch, builders in the Middle East had long been experimenting with a sharper, more dynamic curve. This pointed profile offered a distinct geometric advantage. It channeled the weight of the structure more directly downward, reducing the outward thrust and allowing for taller, more slender piers. When European crusaders and traders encountered these designs, they recognized a superior solution to their own engineering challenges, adopting and adapting the form to create the breathtaking vaults and bridges of the medieval period. Nowhere is this fusion more visible than in the bridges of Spain, where Roman foundations often meet Moorish artistry. Consider a bridge where the massive, rugged stonework of a Roman pier supports an arch with the elegant, horseshoe curve characteristic of Islamic architecture. The Moors, master mathematicians and astronomers, brought with them a deep knowledge of complex geometric patterns and a preference for more pronounced arches. When their techniques blended with the robust Roman construction methods already present in the region, it resulted in structures that were both visually stunning and uniquely resilient. The horseshoe arch, with its wider base, created a broader, more stable footprint for distributing load, while the Roman stonework provided an unshakable foundation. These were not merely aesthetic choices, they were structural collaborations born of cultural exchange. This transmission of knowledge was not accidental. It was carried in the minds and hands of traveling artisans and scholarly monks who moved along the routes of trade and conquest. A master mason from Damascus might find employment in Cordoba, bringing with him a novel method for laying foundations in sandy soil. A Christian scholar in a Sicilian monastery might translate an Arabic text on geometry, preserving and spreading the advanced mathematical principles that underpin arch construction. These individuals were the living libraries of their time, disseminating best practices for everything from the ideal sand to lime ratio in mortar to the precise angle for cutting a voussoir. Even decorative elements like the intricate stone filigree on a medieval bridge often followed geometric patterns that inadvertently reinforced key stress points, tying the structure together with an unseen web of strength. The global history of bridge building speaks a universal language, the language of geometry. It shows us that the quest to span a gap is a human constant, but the solutions are wonderfully diverse. A Chinese moon bridge with its steep circular arc, a Japanese wooden footbridge, and a Roman aqueduct all answer the same fundamental challenge with different dialects of the same geometric tongue. This melting pot of ideas did not dilute the principles of engineering, it enriched them. It provided a wider palette of forms and techniques from which builders could draw, allowing them to select the perfect geometric tool for their specific environment and materials. The resilience of our shared architectural heritage is a direct result of this ancient collaborative spirit, a reminder that the strongest structures are often those built from a foundation of exchanged wisdom. A stone bridge does not fight time, it collaborates with it. While a modern concrete overpass might show its age with rust stains and widening cracks, an ancient arch settles into the landscape, its materials undergoing a slow, silent transformation that often makes it stronger. This is the phenomenon of beneficial aging, a process where the very passage of centuries reinforces the structure. The secret lies in the mortars that bind the stones. Modern Portland cement is rigid and brittle, prone to cracking under stress, but the ancient lime-based mortars used by Roman and medieval builders were something else entirely. When mixed with water and exposed to air, they begin a chemical conversation with the atmosphere that can last for hundreds of years. Conservation scientists analyzing these old bridges have discovered that rainwater, seeping through microscopic cracks, can dissolve free lime within the mortar. This lime-saturated water then travels into the tiny fissures and, upon reacting with carbon dioxide in the air, precipitates back into solid calcium carbonate crystals. It is a form of natural, continuous self-healing, where the material actively fills its own wounds, a capability our own modern mixtures desperately lack. This is not a static material, it is a living system. Even the stone itself develops a protective skin, a patina formed from mineral deposits and lichen growth that actually shields the surface from harsh weathering and prevents water from penetrating and causing freeze-thaw damage. The geometry of the arch is the perfect partner in this long dance. A rigid, monolithic structure would fracture under the inevitable settling of its foundations or the subtle shifts of the earth. But an arch is a flexible alliance of many individual stones. If one pier settles a few inches over a century, the arch above it can deform slightly, redistributing its load to the neighboring voussoirs. The system has a built-in redundancy, a geometric forgiveness that allows it to adapt to movement without collapsing. This principle is visible in countless medieval bridges that lean or bulge slightly yet stand completely stable. Their geometry accommodates the shift, channeling the forces along new but still viable paths through the stone network. Builders even enhanced this flexibility at a microscopic level by mixing organic fibers like animal hair into their mortars. These tiny strands acted as a web of reinforcement, providing tensile strength that helped the mortar bend instead of break, absorbing small movements and preventing cracks from propagating. How does time strengthen these structures? It allows the materials to mature and self-repair, while the geometry provides the resilient framework that makes such adaptation possible. This dynamic interaction between a forgiving design and an actively healing material creates a structure that does not just resist decay, but evolves with it, becoming a more integrated part of the world with each passing year. Beyond its perfect geometry and self-healing materials, a stone bridge required one final ingredient to achieve immortality, a community that refused to let it fall. In a medieval village, the bridge was not merely a crossing, it was the town's beating heart. It was the route merchants traveled to reach the market square, the defensive choke point that could protect against an invading force, and the social stage where news was exchanged and friendships forged. This profound cultural value translated into a powerful, enduring sense of ownership. The upkeep of the bridge was a communal duty, a responsibility passed like a sacred trust from one generation to the next. Guild statutes from the 14th century explicitly outline the role of bridge wardens, elected officials tasked with inspecting the structure and collecting a special tax, often called pontage, specifically earmarked for its repair. This created a continuous cycle of care, a system of preventative medicine for the stone giant. The work was meticulous and constant. Masons would regularly repoint the mortar joints between stones, sealing out the water that could freeze and expand in winter. Laborers would clear accumulated debris from the water channels and cutwaters, ensuring the river flowed smoothly around the piers. When the earth showed signs of erosion, they would reinforce the abutments with new stonework, shoring up the critical foundations that anchored the entire arch. This sustained attention was crucial, as it prevented a single loose stone or a small crack from escalating into a catastrophic failure. A minor issue repaired today meant the original, perfect geometric integrity of the arch was preserved for another century. The builders themselves often designed with this future care in mind. Many bridges featured accessible spandrels, the triangular spaces between the arch and the deck, which provided room for workers to stand and perform repairs. Some even included narrow maintenance walkways along the sides or beneath the deck, allowing inspectors to closely examine every stone and joint. This was architecture that anticipated its own aging, a design philosophy that welcomed human intervention. How did this societal investment complement the geometric durability? The arch provided the inherent strength, a perfect system for channeling force, but it was the relentless, loving maintenance that protected that system from the slow decay of time and the sudden violence of floods. The human hands that cleared the weeds from the joints and repacked the mortar were the final, essential component in the recipe for longevity. They were the guardians of the geometry, ensuring the ancient stone song would never end. Even the most beautiful carvings on an ancient bridge were rarely just for show. Look closely at the intricate geometric patterns adorning the spandrels, the triangular spaces between the arch and the roadway. These designs, often a mesmerizing repetition of stars, interlocking polygons, or flowing arabesques, served a hidden purpose. On many Islamic bridges, this stunning tilework was not merely a surface decoration, it was a protective skin. The layer of ceramic tiles and mortar applied over the stonework shielded the vulnerable masonry beneath from rain, wind, and frost, the very elements that slowly erode bare stone. But it did more than that. This rigid, bonded layer added significant stiffness to the entire wall, acting like a diaphragm that helped distribute local stresses and prevented the stone blocks from shifting independently. The pattern itself was a form of structural communication. A chevron design with its repeating V-shapes naturally draws the eye along a zigzag path. This visual direction mirrors a physical reality, as the pattern can subtly encourage the distribution of forces along those same angular lines, preventing stress from concentrating in a single, straight, and vulnerable crack line. A spiral, one of the oldest symbols of continuity, can similarly help disperse energy outward in a radiating pattern, away from a central point of impact. This is the genius of integrated design, where artistry and physics become inseparable. Builders also used the stone itself to mask the inevitable signs of age through a technique called rustication. Instead of polishing blocks to a perfect, smooth finish, they would deliberately leave the faces rough and beveled, creating deep shadows and a textured, powerful appearance. This robust aesthetic was not just about style. Those recessed joints and rugged surfaces were excellent at disguising the tiny, hairline cracks that appear as a bridge settles over decades. A crack in a perfectly smooth wall is an obvious flaw, but in a rusticated surface, it simply disappears into the intended texture. This visual forgiveness helped maintain the public's perception of the bridge as a permanent, unshakable fixture, a psychological anchor in the community. Why invest such effort in making strength beautiful? A structure that inspires awe and affection is a structure people will fight to preserve. The profound care etched into every surface signaled that this bridge was a legacy, not just a utility. This marriage of visual grace and structural intelligence meant that the very act of adornment became a final, enduring layer of reinforcement, transforming a masterwork of engineering into a timeless piece of art that the human heart felt compelled to protect. A wooden bridge is a temporary gesture across a river, a structure locked in a constant battle with decay. For centuries, communities relied on timber for their crossings, felling great trees to form beam spans and decking. But wood, for all its initial strength, is vulnerable. It rots where it meets the damp air and water, its fibers succumbing to fungus and insects. A single spark from a nearby dwelling or a lightning strike could reduce a vital community link to ashes in hours. The constant cycle of repair and replacement became a predictable, draining burden. This inherent impermanence of wood pushed ancient engineers toward a more ambitious vision, one built from the bones of the earth itself. They began to embrace stone. On the great Roman road, the Via Appia, the first wooden crossings over the Tiber were eventually replaced by enduring stone arches like the Milvian Bridge. This was not merely an upgrade, it was a declaration. A stone bridge on a critical trade or military route signaled a shift in thinking, from building for the present to building for a future its creators would never see. The geometric principles they understood so well, however, could not be directly copied from wood to stone. A carpenter joins beams with intricate notches and pegs, creating a flexible frame that relies on tension and bending. But stone is brittle, it cannot bend or stretch. You cannot simply carve a wooden joint into granite. The entire logic of support had to be reinvented around compression, around the simple, powerful idea of stacking and locking. The arch was the perfect geometric answer, a form that transformed the crushing weakness of stone in tension into an unshakable strength when squeezed. This required a whole new craft, the art of dressing stone into precise, interlocking wedges that would channel force continuously along a curve. The material itself was a perfect partner in this endeavor. Stone possesses immense compressive strength, able to bear colossal weight without being crushed. It is largely immune to fire and the slow hunger of rot, standing defiant against the elements. Yet this permanence came at a tremendous cost. Quarrying massive blocks required backbreaking labor and specialized tools. Transporting these multi-ton stones from the quarry to a remote riverbank was a logistical nightmare, often involving sledges, barges, and armies of laborers. Then came the most skilled work, the masonry. Each block had to be painstakingly shaped by hand with chisels and hammers to achieve those perfect, seamless fits. The sheer expense meant that only the most vital bridges, those controlling military supply lines or fueling the wealth of empire through trade, warranted such an investment. What does this monumental shift from wood to stone reveal about our ancestors? It tells us that their understanding of geometry evolved from creating functional shapes to mastering forms that were eternal. They were no longer just solving the problem of how to cross a gap. They were answering the deeper question of how to make that crossing last forever, embedding their will into the landscape with a permanence that we still walk upon today. The most sophisticated secrets of the bridge builders were never penned on parchment. They lived in the calloused hands of a master mason and the attentive ear of his apprentice, a fragile chain of wisdom passed through gesture and word. Guilds protected these trade secrets with the ferocity of a dragon guarding its hoard, knowing that their advanced geometric techniques were the source of their prestige and livelihood. A master would demonstrate how to set out the perfect arch not with a complex equation, but with a simple cord and two stakes. He would drive one stake into the ground and tie the cord to it. Then, holding the cord taut, his apprentice would sweep a line of chalk or a tracing stick along the path dictated by the cord's fixed length. This created a flawless arc, but the true knowledge was in knowing exactly where to place the stakes and how much tension to keep in the cord, a nuance of feel and experience that no book could ever capture. The geometric principles we now analyze with computers were once embedded in the rhythm of work songs, in the steps of a ritual dance that traced the lines of a foundation, or in clever mnemonic poems that encoded the ideal proportions for a pier. These were living libraries, and their knowledge was supremely vulnerable. Later chroniclers often lamented this loss. After the decline of the Roman Empire, a 10th century writer noted with despair that the method for creating the waterproof concrete of the ancients had simply vanished, a casualty of social collapse and the dispersal of the specialized craftsmen who held the recipe. The destruction of the Great Library at Alexandria or the dissolution of the Mason guilds during periods of plague or war could erase centuries of refined practice in a single generation. A community might still possess the sturdy Roman piers, but the art of constructing a new arch upon them with the same perfection could be temporarily forgotten, leading to clumsy, less stable imitations. How much of the genius we admire in a 2,000-year-old bridge resided not in the stone itself, but in this unwritten, experiential knowledge, the kind that is felt in the muscles and seen with a trained eye? The repeated loss and painstaking rediscovery of these techniques throughout history underscores a profound truth. Our most resilient structures were built by a culture of craftsmanship that was itself heartbreakingly fragile. A team of engineers recently aimed a laser scanner at a medieval bridge, capturing its surface with millimeter precision. This was not an act of preservation alone, but a digital autopsy, a way to peer past the stone skin and into the very soul of the structure. The millions of data points they collected were fed into a computer program running finite element analysis, a method that breaks a complex object into tiny, manageable pieces to simulate how stress and strain flow through it. The simulation lit up with a web of colored lines, a vivid map of force traversing the ancient masonry. The pathways of greatest pressure traced the exact curves of the arches and gathered at the haunches, just as the original builders had intuitively intended. What the computer revealed was a design of breathtaking efficiency, where the geometry guided loads along the strongest possible routes with an elegance that modern beam equations struggle to fully capture. Even more surprising were the tiny imperfections. The scan showed that the bridge was not a perfect mathematical form. Some arches were slightly asymmetrical, and certain piers leaned a fraction of a degree from true. At first, this was mistaken for centuries of settling, but the simulation told a different story. These slight deviations were premeditated. A subtly flattened arch on one end actually created a beneficial pre-stress, putting the stonework into a state of compression that made it more resistant to future loads, like a sprinter leaning forward before the starting gun. The builders had designed for movement, embedding a geometric forgiveness into the rigid stone. Further analysis uncovered the ghost of the construction process itself. The scan identified fine seams in the masonry, lines that marked where work had paused for a season. Each phase was a self-contained, stable structure. The builders did not simply work from one bank to the other. They erected the central arch first, then built outward in both directions, ensuring that the thrust from each new section was always balanced by a completed, opposing section. This sequential genius meant the partially built bridge was never in danger of collapse. A stunning example is the analysis of the Roman bridge at Alcantara. Modern engineers, expecting to find a structure pushed to its limits, discovered through simulation that its legendary central arch operates with a significant safety margin. The stonework is so optimally proportioned that it carries its immense weight with a reserve of strength the original engineers could never have calculated, only intuited. What secrets are we still uncovering? Every scan, every simulation peels back another layer, revealing that these ancient builders were not just artisans. They were geometers and physicists who coded their deep understanding of the natural world directly into stone. Technology is finally giving us the language to read their silent, enduring masterpiece. A traveler approaching Rome on the Via Flaminia would have seen the Milvian Bridge long before reaching the city gates. Its solid stone arches spanning the Tiber were not just a crossing, they were a declaration. For a citizen, this was a symbol of Roman order and security, a promise that the empire could tame nature itself. For a potential invader, it was a stark display of logistical power and unshakable permanence. The sheer scale and geometric perfection of such a structure conveyed a message far beyond its functional purpose. It spoke of a civilization so confident and advanced that it built for eternity. Ancient historians like Cassius Dio wrote of these bridges as wonders that filled the people with pride and instilled a deep confidence in their government's capabilities. The very sight of a perfectly proportioned arch, its curves so balanced and its stones so seamlessly fitted, evoked an instinctual sense of safety. This was not an accident. The geometric harmony that ensured physical stability also created a visual language of reliability. A bridge that looked right, that appeared perfectly balanced and rooted to the earth, was a bridge people trusted with their lives and their goods. This perception was a powerful economic and social force, encouraging constant use and, crucially, fostering a collective desire for its preservation. Bridges quickly transcended their utility to become the defining landmarks of their cities. London Bridge was London, its image replicated on coins and in paintings, its shops and houses making it a living street over water. The Ponte Vecchio became the very heart of Florence, its unique form celebrated in countless artworks. This cultural embedding was a survival mechanism. A structure that exists only as a utility might be neglected, but a structure that is the symbol of a city, the pride of its people, is far more likely to be maintained, defended, and restored. Their role in military strategy further cemented their legendary status. The ability to rapidly move legions across a river on a permanent, storm-proof structure could decide the fate of an empire. Julius Caesar's famous bridge over the Rhine in just 10 days was as much a psychological weapon as a tactical one, a demonstration of Roman engineering meant to awe and intimidate the Germanic tribes. This strategic importance added an incalculable layer of value, making the bridge not just a civic project, but a vital asset to be protected at all costs. The mind's perception of strength truly is as important as the physical reality. A community that sees a bridge as a permanent, unshakable heirloom will pour its resources and its spirit into keeping it standing. This psychological contract between the structure and the society it serves, this shared belief in its timelessness, may be the most powerful preservative of all. The same geometric principles that guided a Roman arch were bent and reshaped by the wind and weather of 1,000 different landscapes. A bridge designed for the scorching, stable ground of a desert would have collapsed in a single season in the freezing Alps. Ancient engineers were master adapters, reading the environment as carefully as they read their geometric plans. In flood-prone regions, they abandoned the tall, semicircular arch for a flatter, wider segmental design. These wider arches offered a larger opening for torrents of water and debris to pass through during a storm, preventing the structure from acting as a dam and being swept away. You can see this wisdom in ancient Chinese bridges spanning volatile rivers, where multiple low, wide arches stride across the waterway, their geometry optimized to handle sudden, powerful surges. Conversely, in earthquake zones, builders intuitively understood the need for flexibility within the rigid stone. They designed bridges with multiple, segmented arches that were not fully locked together. When the ground shook, these arches could sway and flex independently, absorbing the seismic energy like a chain of loosely connected links. The individual segments might shift and settle, but the overall chain remained intact, a geometric strategy that allowed the bridge to dance with the earth rather than fight it. In the mountains where heavy snowfalls could bury and crush a roadway, builders in the Himalayas and the Alps constructed long, sloping stone covers known as snow sheds over critical sections of their bridges. These were essentially reinforced, tunnel-like extensions of the bridge deck, designed with a steeply pitched roof geometry that encouraged tons of snow to slide off harmlessly to the side, protecting the vital passage beneath. Material choices were equally deliberate. In coastal areas, builders selected dense, non-porous stones like granite that could resist the corrosive spray of saltwater, a form of environmental attack that would rapidly decay softer sandstone. They also understood thermal expansion. In deserts where the temperature could swing from blistering heat to chilling cold in a single day, the precise joints between stones were calculated with a tiny, almost imperceptible gap. This microscopic tolerance allowed the stone blocks to expand under the sun's heat and contract in the cool of the night without grinding against each other and fracturing. Even vegetation was part of the design. The roots of willow trees and other hardy plants were sometimes deliberately encouraged to grow into the earthen embankments at a bridge's side, their dense, fibrous networks acting as a living reinforcement that held the soil firmly against erosion. At the same time, builders would clear larger trees from the immediate vicinity to prevent them from being toppled by high winds and smashing into the stonework. This deep, holistic interplay between geometry and ecology created structures that were not imposed upon the landscape, but woven into it. What can these ancient, site-specific solutions teach our era of standardized, one-size-fits-all engineering? They remind us that true resilience is not about brute force, but about intelligent, graceful adaptation, about designing with the land, not just on it. Building a stone bridge was an economic undertaking of staggering proportions. It was a financial gamble that could tie up a kingdom's treasury for decades. Royal decrees from medieval France explicitly set aside vast sums from the crown's coffers for the construction of a single strategic crossing, treating the expense as a national priority on par with raising an army. This was not a project to be repeated in a lifetime or even in a century. The immense upfront cost, funded by heavy taxes or the fortunes of wealthy patrons, made one thing perfectly clear: the bridge had to last. This financial imperative is what drove the relentless pursuit of geometric perfection. A design flaw that led to collapse in 50 years was not just an engineering failure. It was an economic catastrophe that could bankrupt a city-state. The geometry had to be unbreakable because the kingdom could not afford to build it twice. To manage these colossal expenses, builders became masters of resourcefulness. They sourced stone from local quarries whenever possible, saving fortunes on transport, and employed local laborers for the grueling work of hauling and shaping. But local materials came with limitations: a softer sandstone, perhaps, or a granite that was difficult to cut with precision. The geometric design had to compensate. A softer stone might require a slightly thicker arch or more robust piers to safely handle the same load, adjustments made not through complex formulas, but through the accumulated wisdom of proportion passed down through the guilds. The intended use of the bridge directly shaped its geometric priorities. A bridge on a vital military route, like those along the Roman frontiers, was engineered for immense load capacity and rapid troop movement, leading to wider roadways and exceptionally sturdy, low-profile arches. Its design was about brute force and logistical speed. A bridge serving a major commercial hub, however, might feature broader, flatter arches to accommodate bustling market stalls on its deck, its geometry optimized to support a constant, distributed load of people and goods. Some bridges even incorporated defensive towers and fortified gatehouses, their geometric profiles altered to include these massive, load-bearing structures. The initial investment was astronomical, but the long-term economic return was the entire point. A durable bridge was a perpetual revenue engine. It unlocked new trade routes, allowing merchants to move goods faster and more safely. Tolls collected at the bridgehead provided a continuous stream of income that could fund other civic projects for generations. The bridge itself became the catalyst for economic growth, attracting settlements, markets, and industries to its ends. This long-term calculus of cost and benefit is what ultimately drove the adoption of the most resilient geometric principles. Why invest in a perfect semicircular arch or meticulously cut voussoirs? Because the economics of endurance demanded it. The form of these timeless structures was literally shaped by the cold, hard logic of finance, a commitment to build in such a way that the grandchildren of the investors would still be reaping the rewards. A bridge is far more than a path over water. It is an idea made of stone. Its fundamental purpose is to connect, and this symbolism was carved directly into its geometric form. The arch itself is a universal gateway, a shape that has represented the transition from one state of being to another across countless cultures. To step through an arch is to pass a threshold, moving from the known to the unknown, from the profane world into a sacred space. This metaphorical power was not lost on the builders. They designed with the understanding that their structure was a profound link, not just between two riverbanks, but between communities, between the earth and the heavens, and between the present moment and all the moments yet to come. Art historians who study these structures often describe the rhythmic repetition of arches on a Roman aqueduct as a visual poem. The repeating curves create a cadence, a steady beat that mirrors the journey of life with its predictable cycles, or the relentless, flowing passage of time itself. Each arch frames a new vista, a new chapter in the traveler's passage, making the physical act of crossing a deeply symbolic progression. This symbolism was often reinforced by celestial alignment. Many ancient bridges were oriented with geometric precision to align with the sunrise on a solstice or the path of a significant star. The bridge became a terrestrial echo of the cosmos, its stone pathway mirroring a heavenly road. This was not mere superstition. It was a way of weaving the human world into the larger tapestry of the universe, using geometry as the thread. The very act of crossing was sometimes ritualized. Certain bridges were designed with wider central spans or special platforms to accommodate religious processions. To walk across was to participate in a ceremony, with the bridge's geometry guiding the faithful on a symbolic journey from spiritual seeking to enlightenment, its stable arch representing the unwavering support of the divine. This symbolic weight had a tangible effect on construction and preservation. A bridge, understood as a sacred object, a permanent witness to history, was built with a different level of care. Its geometry had to be flawless because it was meant to stand not just for a lifetime, but as a testament to the civilization that created it. How many of these ancient spans have watched empires rise and crumble to dust, their stones unchanged while the world around them transformed again and again? Their endurance is a quiet promise that some connections are built to last forever. Ancient builders knew iron well, but they treated it with deep suspicion. You can find its ghost in the ruins of Roman structures, not as great beams, but as small, hidden cramps and tie bars that once held stone blocks together. These iron pieces were the weak link, the one part of the system that time was guaranteed to attack. As the metal rusted, it would expand with tremendous force, a slow, relentless pressure that could crack the very stones it was meant to secure. The stone itself might last 1,000 years, but the iron inside it would betray the structure in a fraction of that time. This fundamental vulnerability made it utterly unsuitable for the primary, load-bearing roles within their geometric masterpieces. An arch is a perfect machine of compression, a system where every force is channeled as a squeezing pressure, a task for which stone is supremely qualified. Iron in its ancient form was strong in tension, able to resist being pulled apart, but that very strength was irrelevant if the material could not survive the elements. The builder's goal was not mere strength for a few generations, but eternal stability. Their geometric principles were developed specifically for materials with immense compressive strength but very low tensile strength. They designed entire structures to avoid tension, creating forms where every stone was always in compression. Introducing iron into this delicate balance would have been like inviting a guest who promises to help for a decade, but then proceeds to dismantle your house from the inside. The production limitations of the era sealed this fate. Ancient smelting could not produce large, consistent iron members. The process yielded small, slag-filled billets that were fine for weapons or tools, but entirely inadequate for forging into the massive beams needed to rival a stone arch. The material was also notoriously variable, with hidden flaws that could lead to sudden, brittle failure. Culturally, this preference for stone over iron was a statement of values. Stone was the material of the gods and the earth, perceived as eternal and noble. Iron was the material of war and temporary utility. To build a bridge was to make a permanent mark on the world, to create a legacy. Why would they use a metal that rusts and crumbles when they could use a stone that, if cut with perfect geometry, would only settle more firmly into place with the passing centuries? This material conservatism was not a lack of innovation, it was a profound wisdom. They matched their timeless geometry with the one substance they knew could keep its promise to the future. That unshakable stone legacy now calls out to our own era of disposable construction. A quiet revolution is brewing where contemporary architects and engineers are looking back to these ancient spans, not as historical curiosities, but as masterclasses in sustainable design. They are asking a radical question: what if our infrastructure was designed to last for 1,000 years instead of 50? The answer lies in resurrecting the core principles of ancient geometry, the perfect load distribution of the arch, the built-in redundancy of interlocking stones, and the profound harmony with the natural environment. These are not outdated concepts, they are more relevant than ever. Modern designers are now reinterpreting these timeless ideas, using advanced materials to realize ancient forms. Some are experimenting with arch-based designs in carbon fiber and ultra-high-performance concrete, creating structures that are both incredibly light and phenomenally strong, channeling forces along efficient geometric pathways just as the Romans did. Others are looking at the ancient concept of beneficial aging, developing self-healing concretes embedded with bacteria or microcapsules that fill cracks, mimicking the lime-based cycle of repair found in 2,000-year-old mortar. The driving philosophy behind this movement is the circular economy, an economic system aimed at eliminating waste. A bridge built to last for millennia is the ultimate circular asset. It drastically reduces the constant cycle of demolition, disposal, and resource-intensive replacement that plagues our modern infrastructure. Instead of a bridge that becomes a costly problem in a few decades, we can create a permanent gift to future generations. This is not just theoretical. Major research initiatives at universities around the world are using laser scanning and artificial intelligence to analyze ancient bridges, translating their geometric secrets into new algorithms for resilient design. These digital models are teaching computers the intuitive physics that ancient masons understood in their hands, generating new forms that are optimized for longevity. The educational value of these ancient structures is immense. They stand as open-air classrooms where students of engineering and architecture can see the principles of mechanics and geometry written in stone, lessons that no textbook can fully convey. How do we move forward? The path is not to copy the past, but to blend its wisdom with our technology. The legacy of unbreakable geometry offers a powerful blueprint for tomorrow, a vision where our built environment is not a burden on the future, but a lasting foundation for it. Their stone song is a quiet echo across centuries, a melody of geometry that has outlasted the rise and fall of empires. This journey through their hidden principles reveals that their endurance is no accident. It is the direct result of a profound understanding, a meticulous craftsmanship, and a vision for a future the builders themselves would never see. From the perfect, compressive curve of a single arch to the strategic placement of every wedge-shaped stone, these master builders encoded resilience into the very shapes of their creations. They did not fight the laws of nature, they listened to them, translating the physics of compression and the flow of water into a language of stone. The unbreakable geometry behind these structures is a powerful testament to human ingenuity, to our unique ability to observe the world, decipher its deepest patterns, and harness those principles for lasting benefit. These bridges are more than just crossings, they are a conversation with time itself. They ask us to look closer at the enduring wonders that surround us, to see the hidden strength in a graceful curve or a seamless joint. They challenge us to consider the legacy we are building with our own hands. What will our creations say about us 1,000 years from now? If this exploration has illuminated the hidden strengths of the past for you, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And for more journeys into the world's great historical mysteries, be sure to subscribe.